Welcome to GYDA Talks. In this episode, Robert talks to Steve Kuncewicz, a partner at BLM Law. Working out of the Manchester office, he specialises in intellectual property, media and communications-related issues, working mainly within the creative, digital, technology and advertising sector, with a nationally recognised niche specialism in issues involving social media.
Hello and welcome to the GYDA Initiative, Grow Your Digital Agency Initiative Talks, and today I'm absolutely delighted that as a guest we've got Steve from BLM Law. Hello Steve.
Morning Robert, how are you?
Absolutely fantastic. So we met via Paul Barnes. Paul Barnes runs MAP, or My Accountancy Place, up in Manchester. And you're a lawyer, so there's going to be lots to talk about today, because lawyers are not the favourite people of digital agency owners, founders. These are the people listening to us. But at the same time, we know we need you. So let's just do the general stuff, Steve. So how did you get into law?
How did I get into the law? I was a failed advertising exec. Came out of university, hated my law degree. Wrote a couple of books that if they ever got published, I'd be sued for libel by everybody who read them. Wrote a screenplay, or thought I could write a screenplay that was terrible, and kind of fell back on the degree I did. Had I had my time again, I did an English degree and retrained. But I started out as a criminal legal aid lawyer a long time ago. But what I always wanted to do was something around creativity. I don't have a huge amount of creative talent, but I love working with people that do. And that's what led me into the clients that I work with now. No 2 days are ever the same. And I wish I could lie, but I love what I do. Absolutely love what I do.
So now you work with creative industries, with agencies, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So we work with agencies, and we also work with clients that buy from them, and agencies of all shapes and sizes, various stages of the development. We love working with growth businesses. We love working with entrepreneurs, and agencies are full of both.
So what kind of stuff do you do with these people?
We do all sorts of bits and pieces for them. We tend to get called when they get a big client and a huge 100-page master service agreement lands on their desk and they need it translating. When they fall out with employees, when a founder joins or leaves, when they need to put a contract in place to make sure they get paid, which is obviously important. Loads of work around IP, loads of campaign work. Campaign work's great fun because it's normally a question of, can I get away with this? And we have a niche in this particular sector, a niche around social media as well. I wrote a couple of books about law and social media. So we work for big agencies, we work for small agencies, we work for the brands that buy from them.
And you're based in Manchester, but I've been to your offices, which are totally un-law firm offices. I mean, they're far more. What I saw was positively googly. And you got offices in London. I've been to those offices there. So what's, for those who don't understand what's going on in Manchester, there's two stories that come out about Manchester for people not in Manchester. One is Manchester is this big, incredible community. It's really, really rocking. So much going on. So fantastic. It's an absolute blast, and everyone should get all their creative stuff done in Manchester. And the other one is how shall I put it? That Manchester's a bit of an illusion. I'd be really interested to know what your take on Manchester as the creative hub.
Manchester is a creative hub. It's the UK's second city. I don't think there's any doubt about that now. It's not the only creative hub in the UK. We've benefited hugely from Media City. We've benefited hugely from things like the Sharp project. We benefit hugely from the fact that a lot of southern agencies North Shore up to Manchester because it's cheaper. But if it's me, I split my time between Manchester, Liverpool, and London, all of which are creative hubs in their own right. And I don't think it's so much an issue of the people we work with competing with London. I think it's more about them competing with New York and Tokyo and LA and the rest of it. The scene is very vibrant up here. What I would say is different about Manchester is that there's a real sense of community. And there's a real sense of collaboration between agencies. You will get them looking in together to win a big client or a big project. We don't see that much in other cities. It's fair to say sometimes Manchester does believe its own hype a little bit. I can't argue that. The whole Northern Powerhouse thing does get on people's nerves. But if it's there and it helps us come out swinging, and if it works for the benefit of our clients, then I'm all for it.
Okay, so I mean, I'm certainly aware that when I've presented or gone to events in Manchester, there is a kind of village sense of, oh hi, how you have that, what happened there, da da da. Whereas London, because it's so big, you may never see an agency owner ever again, having seen them once, and there is this kind of sense of stuff just passing through and passing by. And I think they're all, as a posh southerner, I do also think with a northern partner, northern wife, I do think there is something different about the way people behave kind of north or whatever that line is. There is a different way of communicating and sharing and making stuff happen. Anyway, enough about Manchester. Let's just get let's elephant in the room, okay? There is, I'd love to say there's a love-hate relationship between lawyers and agency owners. I'm not sure if it's actually a hate relationship.
I think there is.
Oh, you think there is? Can we just unpick that a little bit? Why don't agency owners go straight to lawyers at the first panic? Why is it that law equals tens of hundreds of thousands of pounds in our head? Why is it that people think they can get away with it? Why is it that lawyers are so ridiculously expensive?
Well, okay, that's a few things bound up in one. I'll do my best to unpick that. So it'd be really arrogant of me to say an agency owner doesn't come to a lawyer because of X, because that assumes that I've got an idea of what their priorities are, but I can't talk about them individually, and I'm not going to make that generalization. That said, lawyers suck at marketing, absolutely suck. And part of that is due to the fact that if you're a big law firm, it can cost you £1,000 to get a file open, because of the fact that the legal industry is weighted. It's full of an awful lot of people that think the world owes them a living. And a lot of firms that look at this sector in particular want their bit of it because they can see what a big contributor to GVA it is, certainly in Manchester, the local economy. And they'll use clients in that sector to train up younger members of staff that they can pretend, or at least a kind of their bridge into these disruptive businesses, into these growing businesses. I think half the problem is we don't communicate very well in terms of our time and our worth. But I'm going to sort of put this back on you a little bit, in that we want to move away from just selling time. We want to move away from being a supplier. Every lawyer talks about being a trusted partner. Trust takes time to build, and trust takes credibility to build. And we want to move to a system where our value to an agency is understood, where we can say, if you're going to grow, if you're going to sell, if you're going to get investment, a lot of that value is tied up in making sure you have the right contracts, the right people, that kind of thing. Lawyers are not used to having their fees scrutinised, but I think the way we try and do it is approach it the same as an agency. We spend some time on discovery. With that discovery then makes it easier to do project work with clients. We want clients to be able to pick up the phone to us, and that's not the easiest thing to do. I think when, again, going back to your book, rather than working on the business in terms of getting stuff like this right, they're better at working in the business, and they will say, well, you can say whatever you want about contracts. I know how these relationships work better than you. And sometimes that creates a tension, and that creates tension mainly in people who don't have a passion for the industry and understand that sometimes lawyers can give the best legal advice you think you can. You should be part of the conversation. Doesn't mean you should be leading it. So there's a big trust gap, and I think it's a big trust gap on our side as much as anybody's.
And there's stuff going on in my head. I mean, I remember running a program years ago for one of the top 4 banks, and it was exactly the same conversation. And I remember, one of the things we used to do is we used to draw a picture of the stereotype banker, golf clubs in the corner and pinstripe suit and secretary on a phone and all that kind of stuff. And the archetype, stereotype entrepreneur with golf clubs, sort of a bit of a swagger and piles of stuff in the background and books not being done. And it's and when you ask bankers what a typical entrepreneur is like, and you ask an entrepreneur what a typical banker, you end up with a stereotype, and that's part of the gap. And it's exactly the same. It's exactly the same for me working with digital agencies, saying, guys, gals, can you just think about, what your client wants from you? And I had this virtual screaming around with a group of people the other day, which is, what do your clients want? Oh, they want more PPC. No, what do they want? They want a better brand. No, they don't. What do they want? More customers. Hooray! You figured it out. That's what they want. They want more customers. They don't want PPC. And I guess it's a similar thing for lawyers, that it's actually seeing through the customer's eyes and understanding what the customer's hurts, needs, wants, itches, scratches are before you can even start to do it. And yet the law is infamous for deciding how things should run and then packaging it up and then flogging it, as opposed to seeing it through the eyes of the customer. Is that fair to say?
That's entirely fair to say. If you look at your average law firm blog, and it's really interesting. A lot of lawyers I know say, well, we don't blog, we don't do marketing because we're giving away our secret sauce. We're telling people what we're doing. That's ridiculous, mainly due to the fact that a lot of them haven't realised yet that if your average agency owner wanted to get some basic legal advice, they can get at least in the right direction if they go looking online.
Yeah.
Well, our challenge is that we've got to add value. And that's rather than just repeating what we know and dumping everything out of our brain by rote onto a memo, so that we can say, we warned you about this, and presenting information how we think it needs to be presented. And that's the wrong way to do it. For years and years and years in the profession, if you're described as being commercial, it's like you've grown wings and flown in from somewhere else, and you are this rare unicorn type creature that should be prized. It's the core of what you do. If you don't run your business like a business and treat your client's business like a business as opposed to a problem to be solved, if you're not driven by their needs, then you're driving in the wrong direction.
And I guess what happens is that there's a couple of things. I guess what happens is that people think they can get away without it, for want of a better phrase. They think it's like, I did a blog recently where I said that 20% EBITDA, 20% net profit is the new break even. In other words, if you're not doing 20%, then you're going backwards because you're not able to invest in the business, you're not able to pay people properly, you're not able to get the right resources. So this idea about, hey, we're breaking even, is shocking because you just haven't got enough money to do anything properly. You need 20% of profit, which means you need to be charging so much per hour, utilization rates on, in order to do stuff properly. And I suspect that in the get rich quick, 10 ways to earn £100,000 in 5 days Facebook world, and in fact even before that, there was a feeling that being an entrepreneur meant doing stuff as quickly as possible. And if you could get away without what are really fundamental building blocks, shareholders agreements, leases, employment contracts, actually reading, as everyone knows, I work with some of the largest platforms, and the master service agreements we have are colossal. I mean, and when you look at the ownership and use of IP, it's very interesting. And you've got to have someone on your side. You can't blag your way through it.
Yeah. And there's a great example of a firm I was at before where we were doing some work with a relatively small tech. They'd won a big pharma client and were handed a 150-page MSA. Now, I was pretty heavily stressed at the time. Corporate colleagues to look at it, and they said, well, is this really worth our time? Do we want to be marking this up, and this is going to cost thousands of pounds? To which I say, well, actually, what we need to do is translate this and pick out the important points, and then it's up to the client to make a decision. And as much as you look at your book, you look at any number of different books that say, do you manage out your least revenue generating clients on a regular basis? You'd be willing to put the groundwork in, mainly due to the fact that nobody goes to a lawyer when they're happy, at least most of the time, and you for advice, then it's a privilege to be able to give it, and they need it for a reason. You've got to be able to see beyond the stereotype of what you think a lawyer is. We're lucky. I agonised on my wardrobe choice this morning. This is about as smart as I have to get dressed up most days because we don't have to wear a suit. This would have been probably an Ozzy Osbourne t-shirt this morning, depending on where it is in my rotation. But and the IP piece is really interesting as well. We working with an agency fairly recently that built an app for someone and didn't realise that effectively the customer pays them and the customer has a lease to use that app unless and until they buy it out. And we're going through the process of marking up that agreement and making sure they're not by the farm in terms of all their background IP or their secret source or technology, which they obviously can't give away. And it's things like that are actually fairly straightforward to deal with if you have access to someone who's seen it before, and knowing that you don't need to take every tiny technical point. It's about getting the client from commercial point A to commercial point B.
Okay. So can you give a couple of examples of agencies getting it right?
Agencies getting it right. Well, there are some agencies doing some transformative work, certainly around Manchester and certainly around London. We see an awful lot through Bulletproof, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later on. There's a big move in agencies to try and build their own assets in the Daniel Priestley world of things, and sweat them better to build their own products and license them rather than just doing work for other people. We've seen a lot more agencies who started out as their MD or their CEO get out of their own way and step back and take a strategic role. And I could talk about some of the technical stuff they're doing, but in terms of trends, that getting their teams right, getting their culture right, realizing what they need to do to grow and thinking about growth, and maybe realizing that M&A, an acquisition strategy isn't necessarily going to be for them. They don't need to be in that conversation to be a big agency. There's a lot of them hitting a really interesting personal growth curve and a commercial growth curve right now, and it's an amazing.
Okay, so when do you think agency owners? Because we work with agencies sub 5 or 10 staff. We work with agencies over 100 staff. I guess for us, what's common about the agencies we work with is that they're independent. But when do you think people should engage a lawyer, and how do you think they should do that?
Do not. And what I would say is to any agency, whatever size you are, don't assume that the clock is going to start running the moment that you pick a phone to a lawyer or the moment that you sit and have your first coffee with them. A good one will want to get under the skin of your business first and, like I say, run their work like an agency would do. Do a bit of discovery, find out what actually needs doing, price it accordingly and stick to it. Not everyone is going to be able to afford all singing or dance agreements at age, but at least if you have something to have a framework to which you work, whether that be with clients or whether your teams, whether we're talking about your teams, engage them as early as you can and build a relationship with them as early as you can. Because I think what causes really big issues is when agencies ring up their lawyer to ask them a specific question, it becomes another file they have to open. You almost have to do the work all over again. It's an administrative nightmare for both sides. Just to have, a lawyer's number is never going to be number one on your speed dial list. It should be on your speed dial list along with your non-exec, your coach, your broker, your insurance broker, certainly your FD or your accountant, your IFAs. We're part of a wider cast of characters. We are rarely the lead in this particular story.
So what do so if people are reapproaching a lawyer because they've done what most people do, which is sporadically pick little bits and bobs when they've needed it at a panic thing. But if people are actually kind of moving over to what you're talking about, I guess, which is a long-term relationship with a specific firm, and actually sort of saying, okay, and what's the things that agency owners should do, what are the things that agency owners shouldn't do if they're trying to have more than just a transactional relationship and proper engagement with the law firm?
I think much as agency owners need to know when they need some kind of help, this is when you feel as if you might want to get an non-exec in, for example, or bring someone else onto a board. I will look as much for value fit, chemistry, as legal advice, because most legal advice, the ability to give decent legal advice is a given across the profession. I'll look at it the same way as a client. Do you want to work? Do you want to work with these people? Can you find yourself working with these people? And spending a bit of time understanding. If you look at any book, yours or anybody else's, that talks about the growth curve of an agency, there are various touch points where you will need a lawyer, where you have shareholders agreement, where you're moving from office to office and you've got a lease, where you've got a contract forced on you, where you've got employees to worry about, all that kind of stuff. And the temptation is, I think, to feel as the agency owner or the entrepreneur that you do need to do it all. And it's difficult, really. It's really easy for me to say, make it easy, help us to help you, make it easy for us to work with you. That's our job. But I'd say looking at a value fit and credibility and chemistry fit, I think are the most important building blocks of that relationship.
My meeting with my lawyer was like a triangulation that I read about in the local paper. I bumped into them at the rugby club because we're down in Bath and that's what you do. And then I got invited to their 10th, 20th party, whatever it was. And it's like three events within about a week. And I just thought we have to talk to these people because it's more than, I'm not into faith and so on and so forth, but we bumped into them and they were great. And I have to say there are other lawyers that we had before that who was just the old, although actually they'd done a really good job on the marketing. I have to say they'd spent some good quality money on marketing, but it was just that old school thing, where you suddenly realise he's talking about his E-Type Jaguar and his holiday in the Maldives, and I'm paying for it. And it's just like, enough already. I so don't need this. And I remember the final bit of it was getting a bill, which was just one number, and saying, can you just tell me what the breakdown is on the number? It took them sort of 8 or 9 days to calculate, presumably, the calculation they should have done in the first place. Anyhow, I'm not going to go on about that. Okay. We made an allusion to Bulletproof Network. I'm a great fan of Bulletproof. I've worked with them down in London, or with you, I guess, down in London. I've worked with you up in Manchester. It's something quite special going on there. Would you like, for those that don't know Bulletproof, for the beginners in the group, talk to me about Bulletproof Network. Why was it set up?
So, you made our first big event in Manchester a real success, and you did the same for us in London, and we're very grateful for that. And it came about because, again, you talked about marketing before. You talked about coming across people and the events colliding to make you want to work with them. We have done a lot of work with a business called Riskbox, which is a insurance broker for the creative sector, run by a guy called Mike Henson, who's one of my best mates. He's become one of my best mates, who hates insurance nearly as much as I hate law. And Paul Barnes, my accountancy place. Paul was my client before we did more work with them, and I adore the way Map and Riskbox work. We know a lot of people in common. We can refer work to each other, and we do refer work to each other. There's no financial reward because there can't be for lawyers as far as that goes. And we're all podcast junkies. So originally, Mike's idea was there is no podcast that is built for agency owners, for people in this space. That's maybe not true now. There's an awful lot out there. There's your podcast, there's Agency Journey, there's Den, there's all sorts you can listen to. But it started out with us in a podcast studio in Manchester, just messing around, but trying to find issues that we thought would be important to the people we know. The most recent member of the Bulletproof family is Zenton, that's a financial advisor. And we talked in that first podcast about how you can plan for having school fees for your kids, so your kids can do what you want to do. And then out of that spun an appearance at a couple of conferences, the what was Prolific North Live, that then became the Marketing Show North, where we had a room and we recorded about 20 podcasts, and those podcasts tried to capture various parts of the agency's journey. You know, what happens when you first pick a client, and you pick a fight, don't you? What buyers look for? Are recruiters worth the terrible reputation they've got in the sector? All that kind of stuff. And the sort of the guiding principle behind these events is that it's not a networking thing. It's not a technical event. We're not going to sit and talk to you about the latest Magento update or Shopify or anything like that. There may be people stuff, but we try and make it a bit inspirational. We try and put on events that are useful, genuinely useful to people who attend, and justify the time spent in them. So when we had your event, our most recent event as well, I think it's the best one we ever did in Manchester. We had about 100 people in a room 2 days ago. And one of them was, well, I say in a room, one of the speakers was a guy called Dave Hunt, who's heading up Havas's health practice out in San Francisco now. We had him dial in by Skype. So it was like Eurovision or not. People go away from it, and a lot of people sort of say, what's the catch of Bulletproof? And we don't know where it's going to evolve, to be honest. But we're building a community. And we're building a community that's sharing best practice with each other, that's sharing their successes and their failures. I got to sit down with Nick Rind of CTI the other day and do kind of like a fireside chat with him. And he went into great detail about how one of his businesses failed miserably, but he learned a lot from doing it. If we can make sure that the members of this network, the people we work with, the businesses we work with, are happy and healthy and around in 5 years' time, then that's the whole aim of the Bulletproof Agency Network. It's by far the best. I'd say it's a marketing, I'd say it's a BD thing, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that. It's one of the best business ventures I've ever been involved in. If for no other reason, you get to sit in the crowd and learn at the same time as the audience do.
Yeah, I think one of the things is, once you take your foot off the gas of who's my next client in the room, everything eases off. Everything, you become more open, and you become more available to talk and listen and share and so on and so forth. And that's kind of what I felt about Bulletproof, is that there was a sense of, I just had the feeling that people didn't have their sales hats on. I think that's the easiest way of putting it. And people didn't come expecting to come away with a lead. If something happened and a relationship occurred, that's absolutely fantastic. But I just didn't get the feeling that I was going to get hounded after the event by people saying, "Oh, I met you. Maybe you might want to get a website," or sort of. However that actually comes together. And the other thing I'd like to cover off is the new service you've got coming together, which is something we've touched upon, but I think we probably need to talk about it more. Just tell me what you're trying to do.
So, like anything, I've been an island of my own before. I've had teams behind me, and my part of the firm faces a challenge of scale. So we were thinking about how to do that, and thinking about how to do it from the agency owner's point of view, because I think we've got an awful lot in common. Lawyers and creators, more than we like to admit. Our work is commoditized. We don't want to be doing, well, usually against our will, we don't want to just be billing out time. We want a different relationship. So what we're trying to do is get to some real answers to the questions that you've raised around why creatives don't engage with lawyers, why agencies don't engage with lawyers. What we're looking to build is a service that works for them, that makes it easier to pick up the phone to a lawyer that they know, like, and trust, and to have their major business needs covered off by the service. And we're trying to build it like Amazon Prime for legal services. So you can have advice on demand, you can stream, you can rent, you can get so many meetings out of us a year, maybe 4 board meetings, because you should be having board meetings, your book and loads of good books make that clear. Or you can buy. So the idea is you would pay a certain fee to have all your legal needs covered over the course of a year. If you don't use that time, if you bank it, then you can just use it at the end of a year to have something big done, like an all singing, all dancing contract or release or something like that. there's a scope. If what we need to do falls out of that scope for a good reason, so say if we were asked to defend a claim, then we're very clear about how that scope works. But if something does fall out of scope, it's fixed fee. It's not, we don't think it's going to be tie you in for a year, but what we will say to people is if you do stick with it for a year, you'll have more time to bank at the end of that year and more time to put to a project that you want to make it work. We want to make it easy, and we don't want to make assumptions about it. So we're doing a piece of research at the moment. We've got a survey together asking what issues matter to agency owners, where they get legal advice from, how they get recommendations to go and get that legal advice, a whole different set of things. And you were talking before about how Bulletproof doesn't feel salesy. Wanted to. The survey, interestingly, we put out the other night at the event, and my marketing team said, well, we need this on a paper survey so people can write down their answers. 2 people filled that in. The worst idea. So I did an email from the car park saying why we've learned that this is the worst idea. So we're putting a link out there so people can answer it on SurveyMonkey. At the end of that, we're going to look to beta test it. Ideally get, say, 10 clients on so we can work out the kinks in the product. Then go live with what we hope the product's going to be December, January. We're rebranding Albert, the firm. A lot of firms talk about being TMT, so technology, media and telecoms. We're not that. We're CDM, so it's creative digital marketing. Yes, I know digital is a catch-all term that's hated by some of the industry, but it's different. We're having some different branding done. And we are doing what we always do in terms of being where we hope our clients want to find us, talking about the right kind of things. And it's really exciting. I've bought an awful lot of books on business and rarely get time to read them because I have a 7-year-old and a wife and a martial arts hobby. So, but I've spent an awful lot of time recently really drilling into what makes a growth business tick. And I'm trying to build something within BLM, and they're letting me do it, that mirrors what agencies expect to see. So I'm obnoxiously excited about it, to the point where a lot of my partners may hit me sooner rather than later. But it's a really amazing thing. I see it in clients to have a vision. I don't know if it's there yet, and that makes me sound smarter than I am. That's certainly not meant to be the case, because I'm learning just the same way everything is. But rather than just muddling through and doing the usual legal stuff, we're looking to do something different here, and I am hugely excited by it.
I mean, I just love, I don't know where to start with where I love. I mean, I just love that it's a law firm that isn't doing the, I mean, I've had so many lunches with the partners, and the 73-year-old partner in the corner kind of with his Jaguar car and his flat in Morzine, and that kind of rules the roost, and the younger members of the team aren't really listened to because they're not major partners in the business, and blah blah. So I love the fact you're running something different. I love the fact you're going back to basics. So you're actually. I mean, there's half of you must be saying, let's just launch this thing and see what happens. The fact that get it out there, and then we can adjust it. And then the other half of you say, no, let's actually just slow down a little bit and let's do some of the grunt work, and let's actually ask people what they want. Customer is king. Ask them from their point of view what would be valuable to them, and design the program and the process around what customers, clients want, as opposed to what we think they want and what we think we will find. And then on top of that, you've always got, people don't tell the truth. They often tell you what they think you want to say. I mean, whether they'll actually put their hands in their back pocket and buy, and whether it's too radical. What's the phrase here? Amazon Prime for buying legal services.
Well, yeah, I was thinking we'll call it BLM Prime, but I'd rather not get sued.
I know some good lawyers.
You do. You have to introduce me to one. But the way we're looking at it is we're going to have a diagnostic at the start to really the kind of thing that you'd expect to see if someone was buying you. It's a detailed document. It's a bit like a due diligence questionnaire. Gets into stuff like, and I hate to mention it, I know people are going to go white when I do GDPR. Thought about what you need to do for that. Have you got a shareholders agreement in place? Do you use your own contract? Where's your lease? That kind of stuff, to ask these questions. And it's a bit like if you were, say, doing the discovery work to build the website, then you build it, and then you've got an ongoing support contract, and you can buy modules that fit alongside that. We're trying to design it with that in mind.
But if you think about what happened with GDPR, I think we should actually talk about it although everyone's just turned off. GDPR was absolute classic, because we run mastermind groups. We've been running a whole bunch of programs where in the lead up to GDPR, nobody knew agency side. Nobody knew what it really meant and what the impact would be, and how it might impact on them, whether it was just good practice, which we should be doing in any case, whether it was trying to catch the good agencies or whether it was trying to catch business to consumer stuff. Nobody really understood it. And there were these GDPR experts which sprung up out of nowhere, that said, I am a certified GDPR consultant. Really?
That doesn't exist, by the way. There is no such thing.
I know. But they sprung up charging 2,000, 3,000 quid for your audit and for your recommendation. And then on the other hand, for a fiver, you could buy an instant fit to bolt onto your terms and conditions. Nobody knew what was going on. And what was interesting was that different agencies had different legal advice from different people, and everyone was petrified that they might get it wrong. So it kind of built a momentum out of the ignorance and the panic that was created by people saying, if you don't sign up with me, you might never do business again. And I guess if you've got a community and you've got a buy-in Amazon Prime type thing, then that's a classic example where your members, and I'm not trying to promote your thing, but as it happens I am, where your members will have the combined wisdom of all the work that you've done before in a palatable form, because presumably there'll be like a gold, silver, or bronze answer. There'll be the answer, the 1 hour answer, and the we need to get serious answer.
Well, yeah, the problem is lawyers were the worst at this. GDPR was so like PPI.
Mm-hmm.
Data protection has been around since, the 98 Act came into force, and it has been seen as an aspirational thing that it'd be great if we can comply with. And that's not just agencies, that's pretty much everyone.
Yeah.
On comes GDPR and the talk around 4% fines and the ridiculous emails that saying, unless you reply, we can't ever speak to you again, and so on and so forth. If businesses treat it like health and safety, understand what risks they're exposed to and deal with them, stress test it every 6 months, then that's as much as can be expected of them. In the agency space, what I found fascinating around GDPR was you had a lot of the platforms, so Media IQ, for example, a lot of others, talked about how their method of marketing is GDPR compliant. And what we've seen very recently out of the Information Commissioner's office is a lot of work done into ad tech, a lot of work done into programmatic, about how you kind of can't pass consent to your data, whether it be a cookie or your name, address, or otherwise, being passed down the ad tech chain. That's only now, that's a year after the Information Commissioner is getting to grips with this. But the issue that businesses have is that all of a sudden individuals are more aware of their rights, to ask you what data that you have about them, to correct inaccurate data, that kind of thing. But you've got to step back from the noise of it and the hysteria, and there is still a lot of hysteria. Even the court cases that we've seen, the high watermark if you got sued over a GDPR breach for now is about £12,500. It's a lot of money. It's not a huge amount of money. And more often than not, if you can explain the way you work to the Information Commissioner, they will be as lenient with you as they can. They're not out to beat you with a stick. They're out to offer you a carrot. So just like you've got a culture eats strategy for breakfast. It's a cliche, but it's true. And in this case, if you get your staff and everybody in the business thinking more about privacy and cybersecurity, just things like locking their computer when they're away from it, simple things like that, then if the ICO ever does come knocking for whatever reason, they can see that you take it seriously. And it's kind of emblematic of the fact that there is a reason for agencies to talk to lawyers all of a sudden. But that conversation needs to be sensible, and it's a conversation rather than an in to sell you a product like glazing.
And it did feel like a license to print money at the time. I mean, you just felt that, because you just felt like totally exposed, and now it's all gone, and there's plenty more of the stuff coming down the pipeline. So let's wrap up. So really enjoyed the conversation. I love a lawyer who says how it is about the law firm and the law practice and the law world. That's really refreshing. And I love the fact you're trying to run your practice like a business, and you're trying to create a product and a service, doing it literally, inverted commas, by the book, in the best possible sense of by the book. I think that's just fantastic. So could you just wrap up with a couple of top tips for agency listeners from a lawyer's point of view? I don't mind what they are, but like if there's a few little nuggets you'd like to share with us, that would be absolutely fantastic.
I'm gonna steal one of yours, with good reason. Agency owners, in my mind, need to be spending more time working on the business than they do in it, and that is thinking, not just doing the work, thinking about how the business is going to function 5-10 years from now. Now that doesn't mean that you want to be chasing investment for the sake of it, or chasing an acquisition for the sake of it, chasing growth for the sake of it. Looking back and understanding that what you do is alchemy. It is, but alchemy, only works if it's sustainable. Certainly, I'd say that. Otherwise, always think about what you're signing. Investing in a contract is seen as a bit of a luxury. If you ever want to scale, if you ever want to sell, if you want to get investment, part of your worth will be the strength of your contracts with suppliers, with your clients rather, because that underpins all of your work. Don't give away IP just for the sake of it. You may, clients may say to you very often, well, we pay your fees, so we own what you create, and that's not the position under the law. They've got a lease to use what you create unless and until you assign it over to them. So don't just give it away without thinking about what you might want to repurpose from what you built for other clients, as long as it's not misusing their IP. Keep your eye on the people. We know there's a skill shortage in Manchester. There's a massive digital skill shortage across the UK that we're trying to get to grips with. Employment law, when it works well, helps to underpin a culture. Think about where you're moving. Don't just sign a landlord's lease, because it can contain an awful lot of nasty surprises, and that's a good excuse to talk to a lawyer. But know when to ask for help, but also know that there's not an imbalance in that conversation. You're asking for help from a lawyer, not a lecture. And I think that's about as much as I can think of on 2 cups of coffee.
That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. So Steve's contact details will be up at the end of the video, at the end of the podcast. A link to the survey will be there as well. Steve's going to be there at our conference. He is hosting our conference at the end of October, which is absolutely fantastic. We'll see him there, and everyone else will see him there. And it just goes to say thanks a lot for giving us a real insight into the law side, which normally is just kept at a distance, and giving us a sense of how and what we can do to work with law firms. So
no, yeah, I'd say, Robert, thank you. We're delighted to have GYDA come to us on October 23rd. It's a lot of what you've put in your book, along with a lot of others I'm reading. The same, I'm reading way too much in a minute. Is shaping the way we're building something, and we're really looking forward to seeing who's going to be in that room, and hopefully learn as much as everybody else who's going to be there is.
Brilliant. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks.